Hi, this is Rohan Podar. I'm a storyteller to social impact brands, and I run a blog called Creatively Unsettled. It's a place for ideas, insights, and storytelling for the newest social entrepreneurship. Today, I have with me Mr. Mokkapati, Sathya Mokkapati. He is the co-founder of two social startups, Kheyti and CosmosGreen, which focus on raising the livelihood and the incomes of ultra-poor farmers in India. Hi, Satya.
Hi, Rohan. Nice to be with you on this call.
Thank you, Satya, for making time. So, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from my home, which is near Hyderabad.
All right, Satya. Can you briefly take us through your work at both these startups?
Yeah, so we started. I started my journey in agriculture with Cosmos Green. So where essentially we focused on high drought areas and how the smallholder farmers in those high drought areas can have meaningful incomes. So in this process, first we went with hub and spoke model, where we did farming in two farming clusters, one in Raichur in Karnataka and the second one in Mehboob Nagar district of Telangana. Both are known for their droughts year on year. And in those areas, we actually started working with one on, we started cultivating the land ourselves. And then we started working with the farmers in the neighborhood, almost close to 1,500 farmers we happened to work with, on actually increasing their incomes by changing their crop patterns, rotating the crops, and creating better market linkages. So essentially, new crops and better input and market connection. So that's what we tried focusing on. So that's what we did with Cosmos Green, where in the later part of our journey in Cosmos Green, we started focusing more on sustainable practices in agriculture, particularly for vegetable cultivation. So
Okay.
that's what we have done in Cosmos Green. Now, when we were through our journey in Cosmos Green by close to 4 years, is when we came to a point where my co-founder Ayush and I actually came down to kind of think about what's going well and what's not going well with what we were doing. So one of the things was, while sustainable farming in vegetables was reasonably good with medium farmers and larger farmers, when it was coming to small farmers, there were increasingly more challenges, particularly in the light of climate change. Now, we didn't come to hypothesis that it is automatically because of climate change. So we actually went to the farmers to kind of talk to them, understand whether the work what we were doing was making sense. That's when we kind of realized that, look, there is some serious issue on account of climate change, and that got us to thinking more deeply about what we could do. And well, what we came to was a greenhouse, which could be a solution. So that kind of created a segue into we starting Kheyti, which makes greenhouse in a box for small farmers, which is again oriented towards giving a reliable and dependable income for smallholder farmers.
All right. So, the greenhouse farming, uh, does that increase the yield of farmers as well, as compared to traditional means of farming?
Yeah, so it increases the yield 5 to 7 times compared to what farmers do in open farming. And it's not just that. The most interesting statistics about that is, if you require 50 liters of water to produce 1 kg of vegetables in the open field, you require only 1 liter of water in a greenhouse. So it increases the climate resilience of the farmer too.
Right, right. So, Satya, if you have to create impact on a large scale, I'm guessing both these startups will have to probably work together in tandem. Does that often happen in the field, or currently they are segregated in the way they approach farmers and go about it?
Yeah. So the first 1.5 years of Khethi's journey was pretty much in the area where we were doing our operations in Cosmos Green, where essentially we kind of carried out different tests, and we kind of checked the results. How is the result inside versus outside, and different kind of experiments we carried out. So they were pretty much in the area where we started the Cosmos Green operations. But now we have moved in Khethi to a different direction. But I do find that there is definitely going to be a synergy for both the startups to work together. But they're, in terms of structure and governance, they're operating independently.
Right, right. Uh, and Satya, since you already work with lots of farmers, typically what we see is around 70% of rural households are dependent on farming in one way or another, right? Um, and most of them come from the bottom of pyramid, or at the bottom of pyramid precisely or because of this reason. The productivity in agriculture is very low. Um, According to you, what is the reason or the prime factors behind this state of affairs?
I personally believe that we in India did not have enough vision for agriculture. Now, the reason why I say that is take the journey of India post independence, because pre independence was even more messy. So, let's take post independence. In the first 5 year plan, we gave focus on agriculture. And in the second 5 year plan, we jumped the gun and said, agriculture doesn't work, let's go to industry. Now, just imagine here, in the first 5 year plan, I don't think the house would have been in order, right? So, and we just concluded that 80%, more than 80% of the workforce, when it was in agriculture, we just concluded that agriculture doesn't work, right? So, it just started there, is what I feel. Now, increasingly, what happened is all the pieces in agriculture have been working in isolation. For example, one, there is generally no soil test. Two, even if there is soil test done, there is no correlation between the soil test and the nutrition that is given to the soil. Who is doing that? Where is that bridge between the two, right? Then you have some nutrition. Which plant, which crop, which season, which price? Who is actually doing all this analysis? Farmer is just trying to take it on a gut feel basis and go ahead. And a lot of times, the loans that are given are inadequate, or you can say partially adequate for the farmer's needs. Again, the farmers have to depend on the informal sources. So, market side players again have a problem with quality, and farmers have a problem with non-availability of proper market side players. So, cut the long story short, everybody is caring for their piece in the agriculture as a sector, but for nobody, farmer is at the center of what they do. Farmer is not the focus point around which the world revolves. No. So nobody is actually doing the game that way. But what I'm talking about is not anything new. So if you look at how Silicon Valley operates, it's all based on user experience, right? So user is at the center of everything that you build. But where in the country has agriculture operated like that? It has never operated like that. So fundamentally, lack of full stack, that end to end, that full stack approach is the fundamental reason for agriculture not succeed.
And so, whose responsibility is that, or which entity needs to look at the full stack? Is it the government, or a private social enterprise like yours, or cooperatives, or the farmers themselves, or who do you think should be looking at that kind of a picture?
Well, different people will have a role to play in this, but if I have to just broadly map it out, one, you need government not to do as much as what they are doing right now in agriculture, but actually empower the startups to solve the real problems of agriculture. And when I say this, I really mean it. So government should play the role of a facilitator to create that right ecosystem, provide something like, say GST exemption, tax exemption for say 10-year span, and create a more meaningful structure which enables startups to operate in the agriculture space, but with a focus on full stack end to end. So how do we really? It's not just getting an app or a technology out into the farmer's hand. So technology with end-to-end connection for the farmer to solve the real problems of farmer, not the problems what we hypothesize farmers have, right? Government has a role, startups have a role, and so different players do have a role, but I think these are the two players who have the greatest role. And also in terms of financing, as we look at it, the agri-financing fundamentally in India has always assumed or hypothesized that the farmers, the agriculture as a sector is non-income generating, because generally in farming you don't get to hear about something called as income generating loans. No, you don't get to hear about that, because that hypothesis of income generation people don't really buy when you talk about agriculture. So we have to get more innovative financing to happen in this space, but I think it is going to be largely driven by government easing the regulation around it and startups catching on that opportunity to create full stack solutions to solve the real problems of farmers.
Fantastic, fantastic. Another problem, Satya, which I've heard of, is children of farmers. Most of them don't want to continue that profession. I don't know if it's good or bad. How do you see it?
Yeah, so everybody has a dream, right? So Sachin had a dream to win World Cup for India. Abdul Kalam had a dream to send, to revolutionize the space related work that India was doing and ignite the minds. Even Indian farmers have a dream. The dream is to ensure that their kids never get into farming. Right? That's the reality. That's their dream. Trust me, Rohan, so they would do anything in the world to make sure that their kids don't come into farming. Now, how can you find fault with them? If you are always a victim of different circumstances and if your hard work consistently doesn't pay, then why would, kind of knowingly, why would you invite, children into farming when, we haven't really made any sense? So farmers actually are like super sensible in that sense, right? So they don't want their kids to come into farming because they never saw that farming could really create a permanent path out of poverty for them. But that's the point that all of us, including you and me, have to really wake up to and start thinking more deeply as to how the global food security and the livelihoods, how this entire thing is going to change drastically, dramatically, if we don't create that hope in the farmers over the next 10 years' time.
That means, so clearly that's lamentable that farmers don't want their kids to be in farming. Ideally, they should want, and probably through governmental efforts, through efforts like your organization, we probably should be able to reverse that. Do you think we can reverse that in foreseeable future, in 5 years, 10 years?
Well,
Or do you think it just makes more sense to give impetus to industry and services?
yeah, that's a great question. So my view on that is, if we divide farmers into, say, base 0 farmers and base 1 farmers and others. So base 0 farmers are poor farmers with probably access to no water. It's only like rain fed, and people like that. That's still like a 40% of our Indian small farmers. So when you take their lives into consideration, the probability of failure for them is significantly high compared to the probability of their success. So we should find a way to get them an alternative stream of income and make farming a secondary stream of income for such people, right? So because they need something more reliable and predictable. But when you talk about base 1 farmers are still poor. They're still poor, just that they have access at least to minimum amount of water, or basic access to market. So basically they are like a shade better off, and at least like minimum water they have access to. So in case of such farmers, we can start thinking of more market driven solutions which can start creating a high impact, and which can show change in the lives of these farmers as to they making money. And probably that is when their kids would look at these farmers and say, oh, look, I think something changed in your lives and you are making money. And probably that starts creating a bit more interest in the children to kind of look at farming. But still, we are late, better late than never.
Right. Satya, you're a social entrepreneur. Um, and I like asking this question to all social entrepreneurs. How do you define social entrepreneurship?
How do we define?
Social entrepreneurship.
Well, so I think simply put, in a pure play entrepreneurship, if the way you measure your success is only through the profits what you make, in social entrepreneurship, there are more bottom lines. It's not just profit, there are more bottom lines. So, you can add the next layer, which is impact. Now, again, when you talk about impact, it's a choice what you make as to whether you love to focus on breadth of impact or depth of impact, right? So, but definitely something which is clear, concrete, measurable impact. So that's the second bottom line what you add. And some people also add that third bottom line, like we do, that is the impact on environment. So for us, anything which is socially good is something which is good for the people, for the for the entity which is doing it, and also for the environment, right? So when all these, when you are actually conscious of all these three critical players and balance these things out, and you make an enterprise out of that, I think that's social entrepreneurship. And also, I'm kind of reminded of what Bill Drutton says. We have this famous saying that don't give a person a fish, teach a person how to fish. So my co-founder Kaushik mentioned this to me, that what Bill Drutton said. He said it doesn't stop there for a social entrepreneur. In social entrepreneurship, you go a step ahead and say you want to revolutionize that fishing industry, right? So that's the lens with which you look at it. Kind of you reimagine the work that you're doing, and you reimagine that with the centricity of the person for whom you're working. So if you're working for farmers, you reimagine the agricultural landscape with farmer at the center, farmer as the boss.
Right, exactly, bang on. Do you feel then in that case, social entrepreneurship can reduce inequality in our country? So I know government plays a big role, but let's say if you keep the role of government aside for a minute, do you think social entrepreneurship can be that force for good, can really change at the ground level the inequality that we see, or the poverty that we see in our country?
Well, the way I prefer to answer this question is something like this. Today, if you look at the top 1% of brains in the world, the top 1% of brains from best of the best colleges and schools, they work towards wealth maximization and wealth management, right? Maybe for the top 0.01% of the world, right? But if the top 1% of the world actually just looks back, and if they find as to what they could do with the bottom 25% of the world, right? Then the world that we are living in would change dramatically, because we are facing and we are fighting complex problems. Mr. Vijay Mahajan of Basics, he very rightly said, all the easy problems have been solved in the 20th century. In 21st century, if you and I are having a call now and talking about what we should do, definitely we are talking about more complex problems. So for these complex problems, you require really comprehensive solutions. And it needs best of the brains to focus on these comprehensive solutions. So if really the best of the brains start thinking about how not only can they do good to themselves, which I'm sure they can, if they also think about how they look at the bottom 25% of the world and think of ways to make a change, positive change in their lives, then, well, there is a great hope for future. And there are a lot of people who already started doing that. And they started finding that the amount of satisfaction what they get from the work and the kind of sense of fulfillment, sense of purpose, all these things are getting met. So I think it's not for the world, it's not for the inequity in the world alone. I think it should start becoming your personal calling. How do you want to spend the next 30 years of your life, right? So if that calling tells you that I want to work towards bridging the inequity in the world, I think then it would really do a great job.
Right. So essentially, it could be anybody, not just social entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Right. Sathya, you've successfully managed 2 social startups. Before we go, any words of advice for budding social entrepreneurs, or maybe even entrepreneurs in general?
Oh, well, so this is tricky. So I don't think I've really never advised any social entrepreneurs. But if there's one thing that I would definitely want to tell my fellow friends who are planning their journeys in this, or who are already doing their journeys in social entrepreneurship, these are long battles. These are incredibly long battles, and kindly do not make any business models for 3 years exit and 5 years exit. These have to have in your head at least, a 15-year plan and you have to stay put and tell yourself that you will fight and fight and fight, not with the same way, but for the same cause, for a reasonably long period for you to get that solution. That's what I will do.
Thank you so much. Well said, Satya. And thanks for taking time out from your schedule for the live hangout. And may you go from strength to strength. All the best.
Thanks a lot, Rohan, and best wishes for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.